Hey there. Welcome to Author Talk. I'm John Hartness. I'm the founder and publisher of Falstaff Books. And so I'm here with Michael G. Williams, award winning author of a plethora of awesome horror comedy, sci fi noir, killer, queer, time traveling, detective, Emperor Norton books,
Yeah.
superhero books, detective books. Michael has written across the spec fic spectrum and is one of the people that I very much almost targeted when we started Falstaff Books as someone who I wanted to publish.
I remember at a con Carolinas when you came over and I had just made new covers for the Withrow Chronicles when I was still self-publishing them. And you came over and said, "Who did your covers?" And I said, "I did." And you stood there and looked at the book for a really long time. And then set the book down and said, "Okay, thank you, we'll talk someday." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." And then at the next congregate, we talked at the bar with my now husband. And you said we should do a contract and I should republish the Withrow Chronicles. And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Thinking, like, we'll see if a contract ever shows up. Or is that just like nice things that people say to each other at a bar at a con? I don't know. And
It's literally never me being nice. Ever.
I remember on the drive home, my husband saying, "Do you think that anything's going to actually come of that?" And I was like, "I don't know, we'll see."
What are we at now?
12 books.
12 books? So, yeah, I think something has come of it.
Yeah. Oh, should I introduce myself?
I suppose you probably should.
Okay, I am Michael G. Williams. I am a multi-award-winning novelist. It's really weird when I say that out loud, in front of people, because then that like activates the like deeply inculcated like don't get proud. But multi-award-winning novelist and award-winning podcaster actually.
Yeah.
I write science fiction, horror, and urban fantasy, all queer themed. And I co-host a show called Arcane Carolinas, which won the WRAL Voters' Choice Award last year for Best
Congratulations.
Podcast. Yeah,
That's
thank
awesome.
you. It was really, really cool. And when they invited us to the awards ceremony, my husband was like, "You're gonna win. That's why they invited you." And I was like, "There's no way we're gonna win." I mean, like, we're up against the WRAL show. And then we won.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was really
It's
fun.
a good podcast, though. I enjoy it.
Thank you. It's about myths and legends and modern weird.
I used it for research for a bubble book.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. So it is Pride Month,
It is.
and I did drag you up here specifically for you to talk about your queer agenda.
Did you bring me to your hotel room for gay stuff, John?
I did. I did. I totally brought you to my hotel room for gay stuff. But tell the people at home about your queer agenda.
I am holding queer agenda. So I was teaching myself Canva, and I said, well, probably the best way to learn how to make a cover for something, or to just experiment, would be to make something that's pretty basic. And so I made bullet journals that say the queer agenda on them. I also have a D&D version of it that has little dice in the corners. It's really cute. But I just felt like the queer agenda was a great way to advertise and also organize.
I think it's adorable.
Yeah.
I do think that there should be section titles like teach straight people how to color coordinate,
And
teach straight men to dance.
I was like really proud of this because on the back there are a bunch of different queer identity flags and strength in numbers.
Very
Because we are
nice.
stronger together.
Absolutely. Now, all of your work is queer themed.
Oh yes, I don't know how to write straight people, and I don't really.
It's
Cishet
something in the
just
water
escapes me.
in your part of the state because Natanya Barenkamp, she tried to write a straight character once, ended up like a slinky. I mean, neither one of you.
Well, you know what they say. We both live within relative proximity of Chapel Hill. And
Yeah,
that's where I
okay.
went for school and everything. So
There you
I, in
go.
fact, went there because someone that I knew in high school complained that there were so many gay people there when she began a year ahead of me.
And you were like,
And I was like, and that is where again?
where do I mail that
Yeah,
application?
my application was off the next day.
So you grew up in a small town in the South.
Isn't even a town.
Nah.
Isn't even a township.
So tell us about growing up in small town North Carolina in the 70s and 80s, queer as a golf helmet.
Oh yeah. After that, much later, many years later, that my parents had clocked me when I was 6. And then they spent the rest of my childhood trying to make sure that I knew that that was not okay.
Huh.
So you end up writing books about really misanthropic people who have decided that they don't like the people around them. They don't like the circumstances in which they find themselves. And they still have to solve problems anyway because they're still part of the world. And they still have to like find their people. And they spent their whole lives feeling like outsiders. And in the course of these stories, they find the other people who feel like outsiders like them. And then they, together, form that found family, that network of support. They provide each other that acceptance and love and friendship that they were denied by the people that everybody tells you are gonna do that for you no matter what, including those people themselves who then do not live up to that.
And that's a huge theme in your work.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can track through the Withrow Chronicles
Mm-hmm.
how Withrow
Yeah.
starts at the very beginning. One misanthropic vampire who likes no one but his dog.
Yeah.
And then over the series, he does kind of collect people
Oh, yeah.
to him because that's how we live.
Yeah, I like to write anti-heroes, and the big difference between the hero's journey of like, it's my uncle's birthday and all my friends are here and he's got a special ring, and then everything will be stripped away over the course of it until by the end it's just like me and my best friend and my worst enemy and we're in a volcano. The anti-hero's journey is the exact opposite of that. Anti-heroes start with nothing. They start out in the gutter, just like spit on, looked down upon, absolutely out. Nobody wants to be with them or near them, and they are convinced that nobody ever will. And then over the course of a good anti-hero story, they accumulate that support network and they build those social bonds and they learn how to be a part of the world again, and they learn how to be vulnerable enough to care for other people. And that's a really important part of Withrow's story. He starts out as a vampire who, in the 40s, decided that he had been called a monster enough times and he was going to show people what a monster was. And then eventually got tired of that and retired from it and decided to go move out of the middle of nowhere outside of Raleigh and in the 60s. And then by the 90s, he like looks out his window one night in the middle of a midnight movie and realizes the suburbs caught up to him. And so then he gets elected to his homeowners association executive board, and he gets elected because he's his neighborhood's Boo Radley. He's that like weird mean guy that like never comes to the barbecue, never hangs out, never goes to anybody's yard sale, never does anything, never mows his lawn, nothing. But he'll show up to HOA meetings and be a real prick to people. And his only friend is his dog. And he has one cousin that he occasionally talks to on the phone, who is also a vampire because it's the South.
Right.
But then over the course of that series, that is about him finding out that he can be a part of the world, and there are people in the world that he wants to get to know, and that he is willing to accept the risk that comes with friendship and connection.
And something else you do in that series that I think is interesting is it's a 5-book series.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the same book by any stretch. And you did this. You're doing the same thing in your Books of Autumn
Totally.
series. So, tell us a little bit about the 5-book path of the Withrow Chronicles, because you've got comedy, you've got mystery, you've got a superhero series,
Mm-hmm.
you got a superhero book, and they're all focused on different parts of North Carolina.
Yeah, I didn't want one setting. I didn't want one set of supporting characters. They're all starring Withrow and they're all told by Withrow.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the 5th book, you find out that Withrow is in fact specifically telling this story to a set of people for a reason. And you're reading the record of that telling. But I wanted the first book to be pretty much straightforward vampires, except I also kind of wanted zombies in it. And a friend had said, Withrow started life as a character that I played in a role-playing game, as I think many good first-person narratives do these days.
Guilty.
And
I've done that.
You know, right? There's no shame in it. And so a friend of mine had said one time, after playing in a game that featured Withrow, it would be a lot of fun to see Withrow in a really bad circumstance, like what if there were a zombie outbreak in his neighborhood. And years later, I wrote that book after we talked about it. And so that one is vampires and zombies. And then the next one is rednecks and vampires, because that's my relatives. And it's set in Asheville. And then the third one is Withrow having to deal with the fact that Durham, North Carolina, has its first superhero and its first supervillain. Neither of those are great. And so that I get to do a lot of like mad science and like vigilante heroes and stuff like that. And techno-pagans, that's a really fun one. That's when they first show up. And that's also when the book people first show up, who are a troupe of bibliomancers, like book witches. And their deal is they break into library book sales in the middle of the night and do rituals because you have to be able to sacrifice a little something to get the magic working. And then the fourth one is kind of a spy novel, kind of ghost story on the Outer Banks. And then the fifth one, Withrow and all of his friends have decided that they have to invade a gated evangelical Christian community in Charlotte.
And I'm not going to say that there's a specific Charlotte landmark that serves as the model for that church. But if you've seen the cover to Nobody Gets Out Alive, and you've spent any time in Charlotte, North Carolina, there might be something tickling the back of your head somewhere. Maybe. Purely coincidental. Purely coincidental. But you do the same thing in the Autumn books as well, because Valerius at the beginning of the book is not a likable character.
No, not at all. Well, I think he's really likable, but
yeah,
he would not
I've known you a while.
He would not meet the social standard of most people.
You like me, so it's a low bar.
Okay, sure. I'm not going to deny you your own definition of yourself.
But
I'll not agree with it, but you know.
But the first book, which you're holding here, and
Yes.
you should show the nice people at home. This is the Manly Wade Wellman Award-winning Fall and Autumn.
Yes.
But yeah, at the beginning of it, Valerius is not likable, doesn't like anything, doesn't like anyone.
He's deeply unhappy.
But over the course of this book, which, and this is not a spoiler, it's in the very beginning chapters. Over the course of this book, as Valerius goes through a terminal illness,
Oh yeah,
he is terminally ill at the beginning of the book. There's no
he's dying.
shock coming.
He's working his last case because he's dying.
Yeah. But he becomes this person we care a lot about and are very happy to know that he will be present for future books, including New Life in Autumn, which is currently available from Falstaff Books.
And arguably, it's Valerius.
Yeah, you know.
But it's science fiction. You get to do a lot of fun things.
Right, exactly. I mean, look, there's a new Into the Spider-Verse movie out, so
Yeah.
it's all about that.
Yeah. No, I like Valerius because he's somebody who has been kicked so many times in life. And he has no good reason to want to do anybody a favor.
And also similar to a lot of your protagonists, he's been kicked for stuff that ain't his deal.
Yeah, it's not his fault.
He was born.
Yeah, he grew up. Well, he was made the old-fashioned way, as he puts it in the book.
Right.
Because he lives in a society where 99.9% of people are genetically engineered from birth.
Yeah.
You know, they're designed.
But he's not.
And he's not.
He's an artisanal human.
Yeah, he's a very, very tiny minority that theoretically exists kind of in the middle of the social ladder. But what that really means is that everybody either looks down on him or idolizes him. You know, and so, but the fact that he doesn't have designer genes also means he's susceptible to diseases and things like that. His lifespan is going to be significantly shorter than the average person's in this world. And he is experiencing something that I feel like a lot of queer people are experiencing right now, which is that at a time when there are a record number of state legislatures taking up arms against us and enacting laws that criminalize our existence even more than many of us have already been criminalized our entire lives. There are also cishet straight people who go to sports bars to watch RuPaul's Drag Race because queerness has become a fun spectator sport for them. And so it's this really weird time to be a queer person.
I bet.
And it's like, that's what Valerius has experienced his entire life. He gets on the bus, and there will be somebody on that bus who thinks that he is the ultimate expression of humankind, and that he should be elevated and put on a pedestal. And there will be someone on that bus who thinks he is the most embarrassing genetic throwback that could possibly exist, and they will do anything to avoid speaking to him. And neither of those people are people you actually want to try to be friends with.
Right.
So he's like down on his luck. His career is tanked. His old career is tanked. He's too old to do what he used to do because he used to be a hustler, and
There is a shelf life on that
there is,
lifestyle.
yeah. And now he's winding down the days and saying, well, I'll take one more case. And discovering that on his way out, it is in fact possible for him to still care about a future he might not be around to see.
Now, you mentioned the parallels between Valerius and being queer in
Oh, yeah.
the world today.
Mm-hmm.
And you have lived long enough to live through multiple
Yes.
multiple pieces of this.
Yes.
You and I are of an age, we remember when where the only gay characters in media were either monsters or played purely for laughs.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
you can make the cover of Time because you come out of the closet, but then you get fired from your TV show.
Yeah. I remember a national politician being taken seriously as a potential candidate for president by a major party. And part of his platform was we should deport all the homosexuals because then we won't have to deal with AIDS.
Yeah. And now we have a Secretary of Transportation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a time of change, but plus they change, plus they same old shit.
Right, yeah. The game plan that's being run against trans people right now is exactly the same game plan that was run against me 40 years ago. The difference, what they figured out, is that too many people knew gay and bisexual people. And their math that they're doing now, and they are telling themselves, well, if we run the numbers, we're pretty sure that not enough people know a trans person to have the same game plan blow up in our face the way that it did when we ran it 40 years ago. And so they think that there are just too few trans people for there to be that much pushback against this agenda.
Which is why it's all the more important for all those voices, all the voices to be heard.
Yes. It is like incredibly important right now that all people, and especially all queer people who are not trans or non-binary, step up and say, this is how I was treated, and it was not right then, and it's not right now.
This idea that I made it through it, so you should suffer this same old stuff is such a crock of shit.
Yeah, no, that's hazing, and I'm not into hazing.
No, and you were in a frat.
And I was in a fraternity that explicitly did not haze.
Right.
And we all, like, every time I tell people that, they're like, every fraternity hazes. And I'm like, no, in my fraternity, hazing, A, would have gotten somebody thrown out, but B, none of us would have joined.
Right.
So
that whole idea that, oh, well, I lived through this, so you should live through it, that has been so divisive to everybody who's ever been made to feel outside.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that we try hard to do at Falstaff is to amplify as many unheard, misfit voices as possible. Because I know that, I'm a middle-aged straight white dude. I check all of the privilege boxes other than being wealthy and Christian. But, I check all the boxes. But if I can use any influence I have to make sure that people can see a book like Fallen Autumn.
The North Carolina Speculative Fiction Foundation, they do really important stuff. They draw a lot of really important attention to
Yes, they do.
genre work in the Carolinas. In a way that a lot of other writing organizations who are great, like maybe that's not their focus. Maybe they're more on literary fiction or something like that.
Yeah. And the Carolinas are this strange hotbed of speculative fiction.
They really are.
There are a lot of sci-fi and fantasy readers in our part of the world.
The South is a weird place.
No shit.
And the Carolinas are specifically an extremely weird place, rich in weird stuff.
Not just us.
Not just us, no.
Also us.
But like what you said, I often say I'm a cisgender gay man. Out of the other queer communities, I am like lathered up in privilege, I am just like larded up,
That is a visual.
And so I feel like it is important to not just tell stories that might appeal to people and not just like tell a story that like sneaks in a little queer stuff, but to in fact focus on that in order to help find that audience. Ultimately, my rule for myself is I want to write the books that I wish I'd been able to find to read when I was younger. And that sometimes does turn people off, and there are plenty of people who have no interest once they hear queer sci-fi. And that's fine. That's great. They can go spend their money on somebody else.
Well, it's like I said about why we have the big Pride books
Yeah.
sign at our booth.
Mm-hmm.
Not only does it tell people exactly where you are and we're going to be welcoming and we care about representation, it also shortcuts a lot of conversations that are going to end up unpleasant
Yeah.
and not productive.
And if these are for somebody, like if somebody reads these and says, yeah, this is for me, then they really connect with it.
Right.
And I would much rather have like 20 people that have really connected with my books than like 2,000 that read it and said, eh.
Right. Because that's where your true fans.
Yeah.
I haven't told you the story yet about the Highland Games.
Yeah.
So
I didn't even know you were at Highland Games.
So I set up a couple of tables. Me and Teresa and Nancy Northcott and Mel Todd and Jim were out there all weekend selling books, and I see this dude walking, and normal, I don't know, 40-something-year-old dude
Mm-hmm.
wandering around in his kilt and a t-shirt, and he's walking, doo, 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 and he stops, and doo, 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 and he backs up, and he turns and he makes a beeline into the booth, going straight for the Withrow Omnibus, and he picks it up and he says, "This is Michael Williams' book." I said, "Yes, it is. That's my copy of Michael's limited edition omnibus. Yes, it is for sale." He said, "Okay, great." And he just hands me his credit card. And then I tell him it's $100. He's like, "Fine, no problem." And then I look and I was like, "Oh, yeah, there's no question you were going to buy that book." He said, and he looks down and he sees his Arcane Carolinas t-shirt.
Oh, no way.
Yes,
Oh, that's
way.
so fabulous.
Yeah, I have a photo of him holding your omnibus.
Oh.
But yeah, he's just walking by 20 feet away, sees the teeth, comes in, picks it up, and was so excited to see a Michael Williams book.
It's so weird the way that the things you didn't. I mean, like, I figured that Arcane Carolinas would have a listenership and that people would find
Sure.
it fun and entertaining. I didn't realize it would, like, take off. And you just never know what's going to be the thing.
You don't, and usually it's the things that surprise you that are the most gratifying when they take off.
I didn't think this would take off. But when I turned it in, I said to my husband, that's like the weirdest book, and it's got like, he goes cruising in it. I was like, it's gay in a way that I think is going to be uncomfortable for some people. And I don't know
And
if
yeah.
that's going to, I mean, yeah, sure.
At some points it
Yeah.
is, because I mean, look, middle-aged straight white dude, I'm like, okay.
But, I was
Outside
like,
of my experience.
oh, sure.
But
But I
goddamn,
feel like it like really, it reflected something that was like much truer about my own experiences than anything else I'd ever written. And it turns out people connect with that.
well, that's why I call it your level up book.
Yeah.
Because as writers are progressing along their careers, you kind of you should always be getting better.
Yeah.
Your most recent book should always be your best book.
Mm-hmm.
But every once in a while, you'll hit points in your career where it stops being a normal progression and you just jump. You don't plateau, you jump up to a plateau. And, I've been fortunate enough to watch several of our authors do it. You did it with Fall in Autumn. Emily Leverett and
Thank you.
Sarah Adams did it with Trader Spring, the Third Eye Todd book.
Yeah.
That's very much a level up book for them.
I love their work.
They're really good.
Yeah.
It's their fault we have a publishing company. But yeah, I think that kind of progression, it's how you know people are serious about the work.
Yeah.
You're gonna get better, and then you're gonna find that thing. And in almost all cases, for me, it was Amazing Grace, was what I consider one of my level up books.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, that was by far the most honest I've ever been in prose. That is the most honest you have
Yes,
ever
by
been
far.
in prose.
I feel like there's a point when you're writing something like this where you think, well, I'm scared for people to read this. And
Yes.
that's when you know it's good.
It really is.
Anne Rice used to say, write the story you're afraid to tell, and that'll be the good one. That'll be the one that matters.
She's right.
Yeah. Who knew? She knew what she was doing.
Who'd have thunk? You sell a couple of million books and you know something about writing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No, I was just gonna say, maybe one of these days we'll sell enough books to be half as smart as Anne Rice.
So, right, that'd be amazing. Yesterday I was talking to Sarah Stover and Mike Monet, and what we agreed was that our ultimate goal is to sell enough books that somebody wants to make a movie, but then the movie never happens. So we just sell the rights a bunch of times. And then eventually somebody makes a movie and it's not very good. And then we get to spend the rest of our career saying, well, you know, you really ought to read the book because it's a lot better.
I think, wasn't it Sue Grafton that was talking about how she's never had a movie made of her stuff, but she keeps selling the option year after year after year?
Sure.
And she's made something like $250,000 off selling the same option for the same book for 20 years or something crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that appeals greatly to survivability bias. That is not what's going to happen to the vast majority of us. But
yes,
gosh, it makes a nice famous thing.
It sure does.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to read some awesome queer-themed fantasy and science fiction, you should check out Michael G. Williams at the Falstaff Books website, and you can pick up autographed copies of A Fall in Autumn because we have some in inventory. So until next time, I'm John Hartness, and we'll be back on Author Talk later.
And you can buy books from me at michaeljwilliamsbooks.com.
Woohoo! So do that too.